Yeah, I'm really honored to be with you today. It's great to be at SWIB again. I'm sorry, this is a French-speaking session almost, so that's maybe an ideal way to close it. So as Julia said, this is so I'm going to present some shared work to you today. It's actually not my team, but it's people who are scattered around in different Europeana teams, and also some teams working in projects. So the topic is about trying to develop an approach to validate metadata enrichments for Europeana. And I've got a disclaimer, it's not going to be rocket science. Actually, a lot of you will have seen those things before. It's really about trying to encourage the adoption of best practices around, and I'm going to try to give a bit of motivation and also a bit of exemplification of what we want to do. So a bit of context first. About what we mean with enrichments for Europeana, which by the way is now related to this new notion of a common data space for cultural heritage. So we use the word sometimes interchangeably. So I'm going to spare you the full definition of enrichment, but that was actually one of the first steps while trying to convey a message that we want to have more enrichment and we want to control a bit how that happens. The first step was to actually try to define what we mean by enrichment. And the idea is to really use that notion to gather all the work that tries to augment the metadata, to bring some context, to fix it sometimes. And it can be about metadata, and that's what I'm going to use as example today, but actually we also target enrichment of content. And then we try to have a distinction between the enrichment, which is the result of the activity, and the effort, which is the activity itself. Also, another important point is that we are targeting quite a wide range of enrichment efforts. So it starts with automatic alignment, because those are the usual suspects of things that can go wrong. But we also have some crowdsourcing that happens around us, and we'd like to make sure that this produces results that are valuable for everyone. So in practice, some enrichment, so there can be connection between existing subjects and vocabularies, suggesting corrections to the name of authors, translating metadata fields, which we also consider to be a kind of metadata enrichment, and then venturing a bit into the realm of content enrichment. We've got things like generating speech-to-text transcription, or making subtitles for videos. And I've got an example here, which is a record in Europeana, and I want to show, and that's going to be extremely not visible because it's beautiful design, but it's not necessarily super visible on a big screen in a dark room. Here you got little gears in the Europeana interface, and this represents when a piece of metadata actually results from some kind of enrichment. So here in this specific example, that would be a mixture of translation, and if you've got very good eyes, you may have seen that there was already on the original record an English alternative title, and it's represented as an enrichment because actually what happened is that there is language detection. So we did not know the language of that metadata field. We've recognized it, so it's also considered as an enrichment. And when you hover over the gear, you see a little tooltip that makes it really explicit what this gear means. It's important because we really want to be transparent with our user, and that's also as a result of a lot of discussion we've got with the data providers who are extremely reluctant to have enrichments, either semi-manual or fully automatic, completely merged with the original metadata that they provide. We want a lot of it. I won't repeat what has been said in previous talks. If just this morning Anne was telling how we lack important metadata fields very often. We sometimes have also data that is not super precise. So we really need to have those things. So that's the general perception. And actually this goes quite well. So this slide is from a report about what has happened in our ecosystem in the past year. So there's been roughly half of the Europeana records that have seen some kind of enrichment. So it's a bit distorted because we've got a translation project that actually enriched 25 million records by automatic translation, but still it's an order of magnitude that is quite sizable. So we are talking about a million of objects that are going to benefit from some enrichment every year probably. So with that diversity and that scale, we want to try to bring direction and consistency. And it's actually not done by myself. So I'm representing a document done by others in Europeana who have tried to set up a small policy for enrichment, which is basically pointing to things that everyone should pay attention when embarking on those efforts. So the main principles are quality, transparency or provenance, interoperability and reusability, collaboration, participation and diversity representation, and last, environmental sustainability. And this talk is going to only focus on the first of those principles, which is quality. And there's nothing like a record with my name on it, and I like when it's appearing several times. So this is actually not from the project that contributed 25 million records. It's from an older initiative, but it's just showing that things can go a bit wrong at times. That said, the original title is Antoine, so it's not super wrong. At least it kept it, but it's still very mysterious why it ended up repeating the title 7 times. Anyway, so in terms of quality, the policy lays down several main points, which are very natural for you. So it should lead to improved quality, increase the value of the data. We should measure and represent the quality improvement in a way that's as transparent and standardized as possible, and we should have a process for validating enrichment. And I'm sorry because I'm starting with this very big context and I'm narrowing more and more, but basically what I'm presenting now is this last bullet, and that's going to be the remainder of my talk. So trying to make progress towards showing what a process for validating enrichments could be. And this is not rocket science and it's still work in progress, so I don't have a lot of things, but still looking at what has happened and what we would like to see, we've published a first version of a document that gives the many, the several steps that would be included in a validation. Again, I'm sure a lot of you have seen that, but actually it's not always natural. Actually, maybe some of you will be quite familiar with with the second family of bullet items here, but we often forget the first one, which is to properly analyze and document enrichment efforts. So we've seen a lot of projects around us doing enrichment, and actually we just did not really know how they had done. And that's quite a problem when we have, or we try to set up policies that talk about transparency, everyone talks also about explainable AI, for example, those days. And it starts with some documentation. We really need to have that. And then comes the step that would be a bit more expected, which is basically to look at the result of those enrichments and try to have a reliable assessment of their quality. So things like making a sample of the data set that is being enriched, look at what the enrichment produces for this sample, considering the fact that very often there's no ground truth. Some of us have the luxury of having some ground truths sometimes. That's especially true for the people who can do fine-tuning or training their own machine learning process. But for many cases, actually, there's nothing like a body of annotated data that already exists. So we have to create it somehow. Then there's a validation against quality requirements. So something like, okay, do we have 80% of the enrichment that are correct? Is it good enough? Did we want 70% in the first place, or do we want 90%? That sort of thing. Then using this assessment to also identify reliable confidence scores. So we have enrichment that often produce scores to their results. So something like, okay, I've got this subject, and there's a 70% confidence score attached to it. Very often, actually, we don't know what this 70% means, and we would like to be able to find out a bit more and actually also use that for filtering the results. Ideally, an enrichment process would contribute some results with different confidence scores, and depending on the accepted requirement at the beginning, we can say, okay, well, you know what, we're going to keep everything that is above 90% confidence. And then, because this process should be iterative, we should go back to the beginning after we have found out that we can improve the enrichment, change the process, and then we see what the new results are. So this is a short presentation, so I'm not going to enter into all the details. This is actually the important bit that I talked about a couple of minutes ago, which is the documentation that we'd like to have for enrichment. So we've actually set up an enrichment questionnaire to be filled by the people who do enrichment effort. And it's both about finding out the enrichment that is performed, what it produces in terms of its goal, in terms of the source data, in terms of the target, for example, what vocabulary is used in the enrichment. Is it, I don't know, semantic subject tagging? Is it geo-tagging? That sort of stuff. And then we also want to keep track of the number of enrichments that are produced and delivered to Europeana, and also the ones that actually could be rejected in the process and why they were rejected. And then there's a specific part, because this is about quality assessment, which tries to document the way the assessment, sorry, could you drink a bit? So because this is about evaluation in particular, and we want to encourage our partners to do evaluation in a satisfactory way, so we want to encourage them to document it. So what kind of method they follow, what is the coverage of the evaluation, who was involved in the evaluation, and what are the results, and so on. And this is actually a document that we want to fill with the partners when the enrichment effort starts, so that we can also discuss with them what they could do. So in a way, it's as much intended to be documented, something that is done or that is going to be done, as also a way to negotiate what should happen and to make sure that the relevant actions will happen in the projects. Sorry, I should have not more water. So, and this is going to be an exemplification of this process in a project called Jewish History Tours. So which we have actually tried to we have tried to apply the methodology as we were developing it in the context of this project, basically. So it's well, as all our other Europeana-related projects, it's funded by the European Union. It lasted 2 years. It's finished this year, and the idea was to create online tours on Jewish heritage in Europe. It has several content partners, some technical partners, and the Europeana Foundation. And here you can see some example of the content that they provided, which is very diverse collections, which is going to also play a role later in the evaluation. So the idea is to do some online tours. So the project really needed to have good location data, and very often that's not available. So what they set up is a pipeline to perform geo-enrichment, which basically looks at the metadata to try to link objects to places, and then from places to coordinates, so that those things can be put on a map where the tour is being created and then later on explored by the users. So the process, well, should I tell a lot? It's stuff that you have seen already several times. Even this morning. So looking at the metadata, extracting the relevant metadata fields, in this case the title, doing name entity extraction, doing some AI-based linking, and then fetching from the link some extra data to populate the index. And then come the question of how to integrate this extra data in Europeana. So we've established with the project the relevant documentation for the enrichment process. As said earlier, it's a very important thing. There was a first round of enrichment, after which, or during which we've identified some issues, such as, for example, an enrichment which was actually correct in terms of labels, but actually assigned coordinates which was not good. So that's sort of stuff. So we came back to the enrichment process. There was a second version, and it was then that we decided to do a manual evaluation of the results so that we would have a better idea of the quality. So we've selected samples of the enriched collections. Actually, 3 collections, and 1 collection was split into 3 sub-collections because of this diversity that I've mentioned. The collections had different metadata, and then there were some content brought into a collection which was very different. Then we also spent some time devising annotation guidelines. So the rating that happened during this evaluation was using a 10-star system. So I mean, there are several ways to do that. They just opted for that in the process. So with 9 and 10 stars being complete and precise enrichment, 7 and 8 stars being mostly correct enrichment, but there can be something missing. Maybe it's too general, or it's a bit incomplete. Then the data was loaded in an annotation tool called Label Studio, and we performed a manual assessment of the result by assigning a number of stars for every geo-enrichment. The results were quite good. The average rating are between 8 and 9 out of 10 for all the samples. So our conclusion was that the enrichment can be relatively safely applied and integrated into Europeana. It's not perfect, but it's good enough, and we've got a number to prove it. it's not for every type of data set, it would require more and more evaluation. So it went into Europeana. You can see those fancy gear stuff appearing. That's flagged that it's an enrichment by the partner project. So the final points, as said, it's still work in progress. We have a first version of the methodology, but we still want to continue to work on it, especially integrated the experience on the topic that's growing as we speak, because we have several ongoing projects doing this sort of thing. We know that there are going to be some things that are going to be hard, even though they are essential part of the methodology, like to identify criteria and requirements that would apply across different projects. We still don't know whether we'll have to redefine or to re-agree at the beginning of every effort on some quality targets, maybe our fate. Sampling is not easy, and I've talked about reliable confidence scores, but actually very often those are completely obscure, so we are not sure we can do a lot of things, but again, it would be great. So all this feels like the proper thing to do, right? Actually, when we embarked on this, I'm a computer scientist. I used to do these evaluations 15 years ago, and that was just natural. But we were doing those evaluations already. Well, not always. There's often a perfect storm of lack of resource, plus the perception that maybe, what those enrichment, they are good enough, the value is enough. If we have nothing, it's even worse. But it's not super formal. It's more like a gut feeling, and maybe that's not great. And to conclude with, if I've got one last minute, I'd like to have a show of hands to see actually if it's also natural for you and what you think of this stuff. So who does enrichment, either automatic or crowdsourcing? Okay, so quite many. And who does such validation for all their enrichment effort? Yeah, come on. I know that there must be more hands. But it's so it's not not massive adoption of those principles. We think we should try to make it mandatory for every enrichment effort that's supposed to be integrated in a production level thing. Yes, don't be shy. Actually, that's interesting. It's not. You're not very enthusiastic about it. That's stuff that I can take home, and that's it. So I would like to thank you.
So thank you, Antoine. So are there any questions? At least I learned I need more documentation for my enrichment.
Yeah, I'd like to know whether and how enrichment results are also fed back to the data sources, because it definitely makes sense in some cases that you don't do all the work or it's only done once, but the people providing the data just put the results in their original data, and then you don't have to enrich anymore.
Yeah, that's an excellent question. Actually, that's part of the motivation for which we are doing this. I mean, of course, serving the user right is great, but as I said, there's this notion of a data space for cultural heritage in which the data would flow between the various sectors, and for this there need to be some quality levels. Right now, the enrichments, they are not contributed back to the original providers, and there are some more or less good reasons for this. One of the reasons is that they say it's not reliable. So we have our carefully manually created data. We don't want to mix it. There are probably less good reasons, like we just can't do it. I mean, well, we can do it. We can publish the enrichments. We do that via our APIs, but then integrating that into a CMS is not easy, for example. But yeah, we are working at least to try to remove some of those reasons.
Okay, thank you. It sounded like this is kind of a gatekeeping process, that you have this checklist and you create this documentation and do the evaluation. And the way I understood it, then if everything goes fine, the evaluation scores are good enough and so on, and then it goes into Europeana. Is that the end of the story? I mean, what happens next is, I mean, the data is going to be updated in Europeana. I suppose it's the enrichments are some kind of code that is being run as part of the Europeana platform. Is anyone looking after the enrichments? What happens like the year after if they suddenly start breaking? Will you notice?
So a lot of those efforts right now are one-off efforts. So this example that I have, it was created once, and maybe luckily there's not an ongoing process that will produce this again. So it's really project-based mostly at the moment, but we are hoping that some of the aggregators are going to actually include those things so that they can apply them to every new data that would come through them. And that makes it even more important to have some ideas whether what was done on some collections can be reproduced for other collections.
Yeah, thank you for the talk. One maybe slightly hacky but very interesting suggestion. So you said you have lack of ground truth. I was at a conference 2 weeks ago. There was an interesting suggestion from colleagues from the Dutch National Library, with whom Europeana shares an office, who trained machine learning systems on very small amounts of ground truth to make a prediction of the confidence. Sorry, vice versa. So with a very small sample of ground truth, you can basically predict the accurateness of the confidence scores of the different models. So in this way, you can get like reliable confidence scores using them as a proxy with very limited amounts of ground truth. So that could be something that could alleviate this issue of having like using the confidence scores really to validate the success of these enrichments. Just as a suggestion, and if I can also wearing my Europeana hat, say it would be very good to have, especially at Europeana, some discussion and alignment on how we want to formulate standards and metrics for doing that. And if I can use that opportunity to make some promotion for the Europeana Tech Conference, which is actually in 4 weeks, and where many of these topics, like we've heard here also in the last days, will be also discussed, and will be interesting also to discuss with you further there.
Thank you, Clement. So I hope those KB people are going to show up at the Europeana Tech Conference, and we can talk to them about extrapolating the confidence scores. That's a very interesting suggestion. It requires that the data set on which those confidence scores is produced is still similar to the one, because that's really a problem, that to compare some results obtained on one type of data with some results obtained on another type of data. But there must be some ways to make those things transferable.
Thank you.
So if there are no more questions, thanks again, Antoine. Thanks to all the speakers.